Hi there, everyone. Happy to talk to Boyan Angelov today. He's author of Python R for the Modern Data Scientist and Elements of Data Strategy. He's a business consultant and data and AI strategy consultant based in Berlin, Germany. And so super happy to discuss a couple of topics with him around data and AI today. So yeah, hi there, Boyan, and welcome to the podcast from my side here in Vienna.
Yeah, great to be here, Ivo. And also, you forgot to say that I'm a recovering data scientist. So,
Oh, yeah, well, there's a lot of you guys that are recovering. I hope you recover soon. I wanted to talk about the future of data science, of the data science profession, but we'll come to that right off the bat. Let's just start with a topic that I've been thinking about recently, and we'll be talking with other colleagues and data leaders in the scene about how does business view what we do in data, yeah, and namely. You're an expert in operationalizing data strategy. So really here to talk to you about what is true about the business value of a data initiative that is against the prevailing opinion.
yeah, it's very, very interesting what you say. And I do think everything changed. I was talking yesterday actually with a few people who are in the AI community here in Berlin. And we talked about, they were mostly data scientists, and we were discussing how that title changed. I remember when I was starting out, anybody would hire a data scientist. It was like you say data science, you get hired. But I think, especially in Germany, if you look at the German market, the role kind of became more specialized. And now I do think people need to do much more data engineering, not just like statistics and not just talk about AI, but they really need the other topics. They're super important. But to be honest, if you look at the last year, what happened, the whole Gen AI topic, there's so much hype. I mean, everybody talks about it, and I see this dangerous, I think, dichotomy, right? You have the hype, people talk about products and very cool use cases, very interesting things. But at the same time, I personally try to advocate for the boring stuff, for the so-called enabling data stuff, which is like data governance, data platform, data quality, data culture even, right? And these are a bit harder to sell to management. So I do think we have to really this year be very careful to walk this balance. I do think we need the people who talk about Gen AI products and the very beautiful, amazing things we can do. But if you don't balance this out, we might just build some nice pilot projects which people don't use. So I see this is a very dangerous moment now in 2024 for all of us.
Right, a window of opportunity is closing. It's like now that ever since Gen AI, and I think we're above. I would say we're above the hype, at least from practical business implementation point of view. Everyone that could had like the low hanging fruit, well, that's already picked, and if it's not, then it's not low hanging. and so now there was this moment of, and I think still is, where the data teams are getting on the spotlight, where you could bring forward the idea that you need to invest in infrastructure that you need to invest in data governance, data quality. You especially if you're upfront and honest about, well, this previous paradigm of let's just put everything on the lake. Well, this isn't true anymore, right? The lake sucks. Okay, so you have to unlake it and kind of bring it out in a more managed, more beautiful setting, so that it's valuable, right? But that window of opportunity will close again if essentially data leaders don't make the case for these investments. And the question, the really often not the million, but usually the multi-million-dollar question is, what do these investments bring us? Like, and if it's not ROI, how do we believe in this? How do we? It's more like, how do you think that we should think about investments like that in data infrastructure and data
I mean, I do think we should think. I'm not really financial investment person, but I do understand like diversification and de-risking things, right? You should look at a portfolio of things that you're doing, and always should say that we do the 80-20 thing, that probably 20% of our initiatives, products, whatever we develop can be very high risk, and so-called lighthouse projects, and maybe 80% we invest in more like long-term topics, those enabling topics that we mentioned. I mean, if you think about if you're like incoming chief data officer in the current climate, there's such a high expectation of you to deliver very quick wins, right? Especially if you are new to the company. If you switch internally from, let's say, a CTO, maybe you become a CDO, then you have the trust. Then people, if you tell them, I need whatever amount of money to invest in data infrastructure, probably you'll get it. But if you're a new CDO, you might have issues because you have to walk again this balance between showing the products and building fancy lighthouse things that everybody sees, and at the same time investing in infrastructure. And I always think, let's say, imagine you build some kind of a chatbot, right, with Gen AI. Everybody does it now. You roll it out, you make a pilot project, it looks great. You roll it to customers, and they start to complain about the latency. They tell you, it takes, I don't know, 1 second for me to get an answer from the system. And then you realize, you talk to your data engineers and you tell them the new requirements. You tell them it has to be 100 milliseconds. And I'm pretty sure, I don't have the data engineering background, but I'm pretty sure it will be very hard sometimes to do that part. You need very capable people to optimize the infrastructure, and I think you need to do it before this. So to answer your question, I do think you need to work in parallel on kind of visible things. You have to do the quick wins and show to the rest of the organization you're actually innovative. But at the same time, you kind of have to invest in the long term, right?
Right.
So this is this balance. I think it's very hard for people because it's two ways of thinking. And if you're one person responsible for both, people ask me the question like CDO versus CTO, and I was a CTO before, and I was always a bit more risk averse, So I guess if you have a CTO, you might work together with them. You as a CDO are more responsible maybe for the more risky products, but the CTO should be responsible for the infrastructure and those things. So there's different strategies, but for sure you need to balance those two out.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And you mentioned a couple of important things here, right? I mean, there's this realization that you have to, like, it's great if you're a CDO, but you should have a day job, right? What do you do all day? And what do you do all day should be something that like there should be no need for you to argue why are you valuable, right? If you're and so this was also, I think, a shift that is something at least I advocate for, is to say, look, if you set up a role like this, just don't make it toothless. Like the idea that they're just going to sprinkle your data wisdom across all the organization and they're going to listen and you'll do fine. No, you absolutely miserably fail. And that's why the average tenures are so short. It's you really have to do something operational, and then all of your interesting strategic, really move the needle in the future, not move the needle this quarter projects are you're going to have to push them, slightly under the radar, right? In a way that you have the backing of management, but you don't really you go ahead and build, and then you show the rest of the organization. So in order to have that leeway, you need to be delivering on the short term, and so it's always this balancing act between the short term.
Yeah, but it's funny, like how do you? Always with my data teams, I had that problem, But when I was managing front-end developers, back-end developers, everybody knew what we were doing. Nobody ever asked me, why do you need a budget for that? For the mobile team, for the web apps, like the people with the money, with the budgets, always like gave me the budget for those. But once it was about the data team, I had the feeling suddenly I had to explain everything. Of course, part of it is the data people are expensive. I get it, but still, I had to do so much more explaining. And to this day, this is the most important job, I think, in our field, is the explaining why, especially the data engineering architecture stuff, governance, topics which everybody mentions somehow, and sometimes I think the understandings are very different, is still the hardest part we need to do.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is, I think, it's more like it used to be the classical thing used to be like IT versus business, right? And you knew how like sometimes IT would win, sometimes business would win. There'll be, you can't really remove this away. This is built into the model of how we work in a large corporate. And then data came. It's like IT versus business versus data. And, everyone can tell, we build all these verticals, value streams, tribes, whatever the name of the day is. But at the end of the day, you're still a data. You're still kind of working vertically and horizontally and across. That's just how the nature of the data is. And so I think ultimately every personality that is a data leader figures out their own way around this. But there really is, like, at least to my knowledge, a good working model that's settled where it's like, okay, this is a fight that was, many smart people thought about it and settled it.
Yeah.
It really depends.
Maybe,
What's your view on this? And is it, especially in the context of, I'd like your opinion on what do we do in this post-agile transformation era? And what does that mean in data?
I look at this agility things and data strategy a lot, right? To take the example of strategy, I remember when I was starting out as a data strategist, you buy a data strategy. I mean, it would cost you maybe 400,000 euros. I don't know, a few months of work of several strategists, and then you get a very, very good looking slide deck, maybe 120 slides, and then that's it. That's the data strategy. I'm not a big fan of this, to be honest. Like, if you do this now, and this is normally, it was for 5 years in the future, you do a data strategy for the whole company too. That was more traditional back then. Now people realize if you do such a thing, you miss out on a lot of things. So you can't make a plan for 5 years because suddenly you have GPT-5 coming out or Sora. It's really things which nobody, even we in our industry, sometimes don't expect. For example, Sora, I didn't expect something like this, and it shakes a lot of things. So if your strategy is static and you're not agile, you will have a problem. So you need to adapt. So I do think you do need the short cycles, right? But again, the balance problem comes in, and it's something I talk about. This your cycles can't be too short either, Especially you do need to combine many different teams. I mean, big organizations, they move slower, so you can't switch directions every 6 months. So I'm wondering what is the perfect golden middle of a strategy right now, and this is a topic which I see everywhere. This balance again. I always come back to the balance between doing short-term things and at the same time having some kind of a stable plan, because you do need to hire data people. Again, they cost money. You need to invest in infrastructure. You need to commit to a cloud provider, or cloud agnostic, but still you spend money on vendors as well. So I would say around maybe 6 to 8 months is kind of what I have settled that this is a good time span. But agility and data, they're kind of tricky topics.
It's a tricky topic. It's basically that there was something that we were at a skid conference 2 weeks ago, and there was a remark by Joe Hydro. He was like, "Oh, nobody ever did their best thinking in 2-week increments, right?" So remember that's what he said. It definitely does apply to data, and on the one hand, this takes longer, but then what you're saying is another thing is saying what you used to plan as like a data strategy, or like when you're buying platforms, you don't plan them for years now. You plan them for a much, much shorter cycle. And
Exactly.
And it's always at least surprising to me how people who should be best adept at exponential thinking fall for this. That we never thought that this would come. We're at the beginning of this. It definitely feels like, I remember the last time I felt like things were moving so fast, and that's basically my growing up with computers, was when you had like 150 megahertz processors, and then you had like 300 megahertz 3 months from now. I was like, okay, the way this is going, we're gonna have one bazillion hertz very soon, right? And so this is the moment in AI, and
one topic here is like, if we can talk about the elephant in the room in our field in data, is ROI, right? And this is a topic which is still, I work in consulting, I talk to my people, I talk to everybody in the field, and still people are shocked when I start to talk about numbers and I ask about numbers, right? Because like, how much do we move the bottom line, right? Especially with those kind of invisible initiatives. Let's say you improve the infrastructure, you refactor some legacy code. Again, you should be able to give some kind of a number, and I still get a lot of pushback for that, right? People still.
Well, you just work with capex. Say, look, we're just going to be 20% more efficient if doing capex investments for that particular type of work. How come 20%? Well, show me a study that says that it's 19 or 25, right? I say it's 20%. You sometimes have to rely on expert judgment, but you could still create some sort of simple models that will guide your thinking, saying the cost of running this super complex, old, outdated data infrastructure, well, it translates into slower project delivery. And you can understand, because your CEO, you see that the projects are not delivered as quickly as you expect. Yeah, that's true, right? So but how much that is, whether it's 20% or 15%, we just don't know. We could do our best to try to simplify it. and try to work within this frame. But yeah, quantifying return on investment in data is just my favorite sport, and it's super difficult.
I miss the old days when you didn't need to do it. I do remember those days. I didn't need to do it, right? We did our data science work, and people were just happy to say that we were doing data science, machine learning, AI, whatever. But now the climate is like that, and the expectations are correct that you should, prove why you're doing things. I think every single data person should be able to put a number somewhere. And this goes for data strategy. How do you measure the impact of this? And the funniest mistake I often see is people don't measure the baseline right now. So you should be able to say before and after, right? Because you need to say we developed whatever infrastructure, we build those use cases, but what was the performance before? And there we start to see that not just in data, but in general, companies haven't optimized a lot these ROI measurements and everything. So yeah, I mean, this is a thinking of things as a product, right? Everything should be measurable. I mean, we can do it too much, I would say sometimes, but I think any data person should be able to give some kind of a number on our work, right? Whether you're a data strategist, engineer, or a scientist, we should be able to respond. Why are we working? Why do we have a job in the first place, right?
That's a very good way of looking at things, and I would agree to you that this is becoming more common, and I would welcome this. I mean, and partly the reason why it wasn't so so obvious before is because of these long-term horizons, and you couldn't really say anything, right? If you're just buying an Oracle system for like the next 10 years, well, my God, who knows what will be, what situation we'll have in business in 10 years. So but yeah, it's it is the case. So so this is kind of the way we're saying is that how to bridge the gap between the expectations then of the, I guess, CEO, CFO, COO, and then the realities of like the CIO or maybe CTO, CDO that have to implement this. And we see that there's a mismatch. Between, this push from the top to do something with the AI, and then teams have to come up and scramble and convince that they are very innovative and things are happening and things are great.
Yeah, but there's different roles.
Way of viewing it, this kind of a, I guess, AI strategy problem.
There's stories about, like, I do remember, was it in Fiat? I think there was one company, I think it was Fiat, which they were in a bad place financially, and they hired a person who turned everything around, and they call this person truth sayer, a person who just comes and says how things are. And I'm a big fan of this kind of red team idea that you hire somebody to tell you how things are, I think any organization needs, especially on the C level, you do need to just be honest with the numbers, right? Somebody needs to do it. This is why I advocate for the split between a CTO and CDO, because I think it's difficult to be one person. I think if you're the one pushing for AI and data, you should be allowed some kind of freedom, right? With the expectation, you should raise the expectations, get excitement. Again, the balance comes here. How do you get this excitement, but at the same time, don't raise the expectations too high? And I do think it's kind of the good cop, bad cop. I've been both, right, in my career. So, like, as a CTO, I was the one who always had to temper expectations, say, okay, we're probably not going to make a lot of money there. Somebody needs to say the facts, right? Somebody needs to bring everybody down, but you still, at the same time, need somebody to get everybody excited about the potential market. So I do think these are two separate people who need to do that job, to be honest. But you can't just follow the hype, right? I think everybody just fall on your face if you just ride the hype. It's very tempting, right? Because for 1 or 2 years, you'll be very visible because you have those GenAI initiatives, right? But eventually, when things need to scale and you need to prove ROI, right? If you haven't invested in the more enabling topics, you will have a problem. So you kind of postpone, you delay the risk, but there's no free lunch. In Bulgaria, we say that the bill always arrives, right? It's whatever you do, you always get the bill. I'm not sure it's a Bulgarian or German saying, but you always get like the bill eventually. So you kind of borrow from the future. So, but my advice is always to split the role. You need an innovative AI leader, and you need somebody who talks about the enabling data things, right? And pushes for those, right? And I think that's the easiest way to do it with the C-level people.
Right. Now, especially because they'll just bringing unrealistic expectations of, okay, we just we'll see if I would be like, okay, how many people can we release because we just can do all ultimate things, and you'll be like, hold on, we might be able to make existing people more productive, but the effect of an FT reduction is not what you hear for every industry, right? It's just not there.
Yeah, we can role play this a bit. Yesterday, this thing I think was from a company which created this complete programmer agent, right? It was like this agent idea where you have a complete developer, right? Was it from? I'm not sure if it was
Yeah,
from
I
NVIDIA.
saw it.
I saw it and I was thinking, I immediately thought, companies around now scramble to do this, right? All CTOs answer this question: should we hire those, right? And the thing is, I don't think it's fair to say no. I don't think you are a good professional person if you just say no, this is a stupid idea, we're gonna have problems. You should always take some risk. You can say let's try, let's maybe take those generative developers, right, for a spin in maybe writing tests somewhere, automating this part. So you can try things at the same time, but still lower the expectations. But you shouldn't say no, right? I think
right.
new
The
technologies
expectations go on both sides, and I mean the following. I recently did an webinar with the IMA on Gen AI and finance, and there's a lot of like 2,300 people were there, and I was looking at this new feature where in real time you can see the reactions of people, right? And so we're doing our slides, everything is going fine, and as soon as we had a slide that mentions that AI agents is going to replace some of these repetitive tasks, like for example, just in the corporate space, like looking at the policies, like, and you have to update the policy and take certain action, like recognize something, reword the text, and then update the policy. So like there's like a sequence of actions that an AI agent can carry through. It's not like this one-time response, like, okay, give me the text of the policy, Gen AI gives you the text, but it sort of automatically completes this and updates the policy because it's low risk, it's a slow incremental change. And for whatever reason, this AI agent is going to replace us, struck a nerve with the audience. And I see immediately thumbs down going flying. I'm like, okay, is it us? We just like, no, this is the AI agent slide, because no one wants to get replaced by an AI.
No.
And they're probably likely not going to be replaced if that's the best way to think about it. But with software development, I'm fully convinced that that there's going to be very, very a very different world, like let's say 5 years from now, the way we develop software when we're talking about new software and the way that we migrate old systems. I mean, we don't talk about this all that much, but we have a product that slash service that does that, and so there's a lot of potential in optimizing unnecessary programming work, but yeah, I think you also have a positive view of this, and not like, oh, this is not zero sum.
Like, I've been around the field for long enough to see the changes. I remember when I was starting out as a data scientist, like I had to do so many things myself. It was such a mess. Now, with the cloud tools that you have, you also the basic development environment that you have, VS Code, right? So you just have like the tools are so much nicer. You can do so many nice things. I'm very jealous of the people starting out in the field now because they can focus on the hardest and most interesting part of the work. So I'm really part of that camp that I think the software development field will get automated some parts of it, but they are not the fun parts. And I think people can move on to systems and architecture and thinking about problems.
That's a very libertarian way of viewing this. Thank you so much. I think that surpasses also my own optimistic view. I think saying to a lot of average developers that they can focus on the hard problems is really grading them on a curve in a way that they will not make a lot of people happy. But it is their harsh reality, right? I mean, they're going to have to move into more productive endeavors, right? Because you are going to have to figure out really the complex, the algorithmic part, the security, the infrastructure piece. You're not going to have to, draft me a, REST API, whatever.
And in terms of knowledge, right? Like Stack Overflow. I mean, I grew up with that, right? So that was my generation, the knowledge base. It was amazing. I remember without it, I wouldn't be able to do anything. But now I cannot imagine using Stack Overflow. For me, the idea that I would go to Stack Overflow, it's crazy, right?
I'm so much older than you. I grew up with, I don't know if you know, there was the Microsoft Developer Network. It came on CDs. It came on CDs. When you were a Microsoft partner, they would deliver like a whole big box of CDs. And this would be, it was like the Encarta encyclopedia of writing code, right? And so you would basically, it was curated. It was very great. And now after that, once we had to look for stuff on the internet, it felt much more chaotic and non-structured, and but you could find a lot more solutions, right? And And yeah, because most of what you do is copy paste, right? So there's just
Yeah.
like no going around that fact. But yeah, I mean, I share your positive positive view through this all the way. I saw talk a little bit maybe about your books and your research. I mean, the elements of data strategy. What can we? Yeah. What is like an interesting take from there?
I mean, data strategy, when I wrote that book, right, and when I started to work as a data strategist, I didn't have like a very practical manual, right? So I got the job title. When I looked around, I asked the other data strategists, so what do we actually do? So I came from data science, you can imagine, very fresh. And then I asked, so what do we actually do, right? And, I heard things like current state analysis, gap analysis, deviation workshops, that sounded very practical, and there were, right? There were concrete things, but there was no manual how to do it. And I did read a few things. There was a very good book. It's called Technology Strategy Patterns, which is a book very underrated. I really suggest people, especially the CTO people, should read it. And that provides some kind of framework, right? So, and I decided somebody needs to write some kind of an opinionated framework. And in the first page of the book, I write, I haven't done a million data strategies at that point. And I wrote, this is just an opinion because somebody needs to have an opinion. Because at that point, there was no opinion what data strategy is. You had this kind of, and I still see these terrible, terrible slides where you have a list of goals and somebody says this is a strategy. And, it's very funny to see, like, how can you have a list of goals and say this is a strategy? But my book attempted to create this framework, and this is just a framework. And I always said, like, take it, remix it, remodel this, do whatever you need to do. And for me, data strategy had those three points. You have due diligence, you have design, and delivery. So design is the most typical thing that everybody knows. You have like architecture, you have technology, you have use cases, you prepare them, you prepare an operating model, you have a roadmap standard from technology strategy. But the due diligence part, everybody skipped. And this is what always upset me in my early consulting days. We go to a client and we tell them what to do, right? But we don't know what the situation, right? And how can you tell somebody where to go if you don't know where they are? So it's you can't give any directions if you don't know where the company is. So
You're touching the ethics of management consulting. Beware.
I know, but I had a very strong opinion, and I do think that the book sells well, and people give me good feedback. So I think I decided to have a very strong opinion with that book, and I think it paid off in general. People agree with most of the points. And I'm very happy on the due diligence part, really think what the business is, try to understand, is your business selling socks? Cool, but you have to align with that. I mean, it's kind of beating a dead horse talking about aligning with business strategy, but I'm always shocked how often it's not done. So that's why I wrote that book. I told myself somebody needs to take a stand and just say what data strategy is and just face the criticism, because of course you take a stand and people ask you what is that data strategy, but
I assume you share also Sol Rashidi's opinion that there should be no AI strategy without a data strategy.
Yes. I mean, it's like a matryoshka. There should be no data strategy without IT strategy and then business strategy. All of those are connected, of course. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, other books we apparently have in common that we enjoy is the works of Nassim Taleb.
Yeah.
So, what do you think is good pieces of advice that are best applicable to devising and running data strategies? I'll tell you, when I read these books, and oftentimes I would reread certain parts just because I enjoy them, I come up with other ideas of how these concepts apply everywhere. Right? I mean,
yeah. It's my favorite, probably my favorite author, and one idea is the whole via negativa, right, approach, that you look at the negative instead of the positive. And me being Eastern European originally, I'm like, it's kind of in my culture to think that sometimes. And I think for example, the question, how do we get value from data? Favorite question for people like us, right? It's our favorite question. It's a hard one, but if you ask how do we stop losing value from data, if you look at the negative, where do we lose money because of data? That's a very quantifiable, concrete thing that you can do immediately. Things,
absolutely,
right?
and those are the
this
projects
is a
that we
very funny
prioritize.
one.
Exactly, those are things
Sometimes
yeah.
sometimes in consulting, like it's a hard sell because, of course, this type of workshops, and I do tend to do workshops like this where I identify more like sources of waste instead of positive things, and say, okay, let's not think how AI can do whatever for us. Let's look where we are losing performance, where we're losing operational issues we have, where do we lose money, and then try to identify those things. Those are much more actionable. So this is something I learned from him because, again, as a kid growing up, you can ask your parents about life advice. They'll tell you, yeah, be, I don't know, be smart, like have a good career. I mean, this is not actionable. But if somebody tells you, don't smoke, don't do, it's much more easier to avoid those things. So this is something we should do more in business.
Yeah,
But it's difficult
learning
because
what
it's
doesn't
also
work and identifying what doesn't work is robust, right? So that's what his thesis is.
and it's easy. It's like not exciting. Those workshops are not particularly fun sometimes for people because they're more negative. It's not like haha AI, whatever positive things. You look at things which are broken. You look at issues, but it's so much more measurable. You make so much money for organizations if you remove obstacles. And I do think a lot of data engineering, data science can be focused in those things. How do you optimize things instead of adding on top? I think it's a much more productive way.
Oh, this is difficult at so many level in the German speaking world for various reasons, including cultural ones and how we do business.
Yeah.
Like we don't make mistakes. We don't talk about failures. We don't do failures. Of course,
Yeah.
everything is great. And also the whole discussions like at conferences is more like, okay, these are the cool use cases we build, and it's like, but this doesn't really move the needle. This doesn't, like, obviously did more interesting things, or you can share experience, but it's just like there's just not this culture of addressing this thing in a why. So what you're saying is true, and that's why a workshop like this is very painful, very painful. They hire us to do an AI strategy to show what cool new feature can be sprinkled on top of their organization or their products or their whatever that will improve things in and of its own, but not what is really where is the stuff leaking that we can glue with some data and AI.
Somebody needs to do it. Like if an organization cannot issue an invoice to their customers, they shouldn't really talk that much about AI, what that can do. They should focus on the basics first, right? The data issues that we have, you can make so much more money. I mean, on the side that it's a harder topic to discuss with people and clients, it is, but it's measurable. It's about money, and you can quickly make measurable gains. And I think if any business person appreciates when you save money, right? When you make money for the business in that way. So I think in that
in
sense,
organizations that have this market view things, you'd be surprised how many others are really not that much. I mean, their budget has to be maximized and not minimized.
So that's one idea from Kim, right? But anti-fragility, right? How do you build systems which are
let's do it like this. Let's say I'll just mention 4 of my favorite books, and let's explore at least around the title. So let's start with the Black Swan. Maybe no, the full by randomness was first. Okay, let's start with full by randomness. Like what are let's put it this way. What are random outcomes that we correctly or incorrectly attribute to the data team? What do you think?
Random outcomes. I think if you talk about statistics, I think it's a bit difficult. But if you talk about people misunderstanding numbers, I think I can talk about this, especially about budgets. Because I've seen situations where customers they pay a lot of money for people, but save on vendor costs. So this is my favorite, again, management problem. Like, how can you like maybe 200 euros per month seems like a lot to certain organizations, right? But then they would prefer to pay a salary for 5 people to do that work, right? And this kind of misunderstanding of basic numbers sometimes shocks me, right?
I have the evil heuristic about this, which I'm happy to share this advice with all the colleagues, friends, listeners. So generally, if you can afford to, do not work for an organization that will not allow you to print in color, because printing in color, like if printing in color is disabled to you by default and you have to ask someone to print in color, avoid, quit, move on to better organizations. It doesn't matter if you're whatever you might be the managing director of this organization, you probably should work for a better one.
Exactly.
Because it fell for this type of fallacy, right? Where where they try to save on the on the wrong spot, where other processes that are just completely bloated are just overlooked. Yeah. So
typically also like different if you look at some kind of a pipeline, right? People optimizing the wrong chain. As I said, the invoice thing, right? Like you have a problem with the data quality like at the start, but then you build some AI at the end, which nobody cares for, and just don't think it's through, right? So there's a lot of fallacies about numbers, I guess. So there's a lot of issues there. But let's talk about the other books. The other books, for randomness.
Black Swan. What do you think is the Black Swan event that we saw in data and AI the recent years?
So Black Swan in terms like nobody expected this,
Yeah.
and
maybe a White Swan.
A White Swan. I mean,
okay. A reverse Black Swan. So White Swan is a wrong one.
Which one, right? I mean,
so is it the GPT-3, for example, like a defining moment where like, okay, this wasn't expected by everyone, it was likely to happen? Was it this breakthrough in AI? I would say.
I think that's an easy one, but I would argue for the current Sora thing.
Okay.
It's much more. I think that's much more fresh, also in my memory, and I think that was completely unexpected because, and I think people misunderestimate the impact of that because to make a realistic video, because with fake text we had it before, right? I mean, fake news in terms of text we had. Fake pictures we had, right? Somehow it was slower, right? So people are used to now that in a way. It's still a problem, but the video part where you can make whole videos, and now there's a big discussion whether this should happen before the elections in the US, whether OpenAI should release that. So I think that could be a real black swan. We should be very careful with Sora and video generation of that quality.
There's it's a very complicated subject, right? I think it would ultimately open a lot more, avenues for creativity, and as all things, it could be misused. It could be used for bad stuff, right? So, but it's not like, I'll give you this. When people talk about this multimodal AI, that's like, oh, boring. We don't care. And now it's like, okay, you can generate voice, you can generate images that are completely, so it's difficult to tell what's real and what's not. So I fully with you that this might be the black swan.
I would be a millionaire if I could predict a black swan event, but I was surprised with a few of the developments, I remember very vividly the difference between GPT 3.5 and 4, because with 3.5 I still thought, cool, right, helps, but 4 suddenly was very helpful. So it was a big jump. So yeah, even we in the industry become surprised, let alone regular people, right? So I think, yeah, there's a lot of issues there, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this. Let's move on to Antifragile, right? We spoke about this. What do you think Antifragile? What's the equivalent of Antifragile in the data systems world? Is it the server in the basement, or is it the cloud data warehousing? What is it in terms of data infrastructure, you think?
I think in terms of data, I would focus actually more about the data teams who build things. It's a bit like more close to what I have done in my career. There's a lot of fragility in how you set up teams, right? Especially in terms of skill set. Because if you just have everything you have is a hammer, you see nails everywhere. So I think there's a lot of fragility if you just have very specialized teams. So I think right now I see this consolidation of data engineering and data science. If you can hire people who can do both, and of course you might move slower than just having perfect experts in just data science, for example, or just data engineering. So I think we can de-risk a lot of our work if we hire more diverse teams in that sense. So I do think anti-fragility would apply in how do you build your companies to withstand challenges. And I think still most of the challenges are based from people in decision making, right? How can you build teams which can adapt very quickly? And this is still the number one management problem we have.
But this is ringing so close to home. I mean, we think about a lot around, okay, we have data engineers. These data engineers have to solve business problems. And however you talk about, okay, you guys, I mean, we have to, as data engineers, we have to think like the business. And how do you make a data engineer a business person? And after a lot of deliberate thinking, careful experimentations, and years of experience, I think the easiest way is to say, okay, tomorrow you're a business. That's it. Mm-hmm. Your training is done. Maybe get a 1 hour intro. That's it. You're a business now. That's the only formula that works, really, because everything else with months and years of painful like it is, you're not missing any actual expertise in terms of skills. You're missing the thinking. Okay, no, domain knowledge and products, fine, you can have that, but you can also have that as a data engineer and still not think like the way that a business person would think. And so you really have to join their team and be them to know the difference. And it's so hard to communicate, because the question always comes about, okay, what are the requirements here? Who's going to write the requirements? And what you're saying is, in a team where you're the data engineer and the data scientist, or the data engineer and the business person, you're largely responsible for filling the gaps on the requirements. And if you think someone else will do it for you, then you're in the wrong job. This is my view on things. And but yeah, this convergence is long overdue, I think, of the roles.
You know, I think we're committing right now the fallacy, one of the fallacies we should discuss, because imagine you do a perfect team. You make your data engineers and data scientists, business people, but then somebody on the C-level makes a stupid decision and all of this doesn't matter, you know? So I've seen this a lot. I unfortunately, also as a CTO, the decisions that I used to make, I remember the weight of that, you know, and it wasn't easy to get used to it, but you can make such a big mess with one stupid decision, and you can erase so much, especially in a very hierarchical environment, you can erase so much good work. I've seen really capable data engineers, scientists building perfect models, but all of this was nobody thought, why are we building this product? I always say it's like digging the perfect hole in the wrong garden. This is my favorite metaphor, and this is probably the worst thing that you see. The best data infrastructure, best models.
Could have been in the correct garden, and the whatever C exec just deprioritized it, for gave it the level of thought you need to go from your, I don't know, from his office to the elevator, right? That's how much thinking they put into it, or he or she put into it, and then afterwards, just months of, you know, and the way that I mean, maybe if I could just a little bit of a minute for advertisement here for the consulting space. This is also why I enjoy, and I would welcome people to join our teams, I guess, is to say, well, look, if you work with one client when such a decision gets made, great. You laugh about it. You move on to the next client. If you're stuck in a large organization and stake your entire career, and then some bullshit decision gets made that you're just a collateral for, well, that's unfortunately for you, because you just put all your eggs into this one basket. They just didn't, you know, your deferred benefits never materialized, right? So they were accumulating in an account that was just zeroed.
Exactly.
And so this is a great reason for you to join consulting, right? You could just work on many customers and experience many other C execs.
And you can say the truth.
Maybe even help them prevent one or two of those mistakes.
You can say the truth. I do remember also as a CTO, I mean, I'm mostly an informal person, but still people see your title, they don't want to tell you problems, right? But as a consultant, that's one of the most fun thing for the job. I guess this is very frustrating for people within the company sometimes, because they talk about the problems for months, and then their C-level people hire somebody like me, external, who comes, says something in the first 5 minutes, and everybody kind of says, "Oh, okay, that's a good point. Let's do that."
You're absolutely. This is an absolute problem, and I say, if you're annoyed by this type of problem, join consulting.
Yeah.
That's it. And also as a corollary, there's a situation where I have seen in the past, and recently not so much in the data space, but certainly this certainly comes quite a lot in software engineering, is where people are like, oh, this guy's just making slides. Have you ever made slides? You know how difficult it is to put your thoughts in a structured way where a lot of smart people would look at them and challenge their every token of this slide? Try it, and they try it, they fail, and they're like, oh, well, it wasn't so easy. Well, then you shouldn't have made jokes about it.
One caveat I always say, like, to be a good consultant, I think you have been on both sides, right? So sometimes it is funny, right? If you consult somebody on a C-level, I mean, not everybody can be on a C-level before, right? But you do need some experience, and I think a person who has gone through bad things, who has seen negative things, is super valuable, right? So you can't beat experience, right? You can read all the books in the world, right, in consulting, but a lot of the things are based on experience, I think. But the positive is, once you see the problems, they're all the same. If you talk about software, if you talk about data, that's why I'm confident about our field, because the software field had the same problems when it was being disrupted, right? So we just go deal with this, but we have to make the mistakes and learn from them very fast, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And maybe since we are on the tangent of the books of Nassim Taleb, skin in the game, like
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's
yeah. Yeah, give an example of the skin in the game here in the data space.
in the data space. I
Well,
mean,
my example for this just before is just like I mentioned this to say, well, the typical tenure of the CDO is all the more shorter, the less time he or she spends, doing operational things. So if they don't have skin in the game, essentially.
I mean, skin in the game, like, I mean, I can give many examples. One of them is you can't be like tell people to use new technologies, right? If you don't use them yourself. So, for example, if you tell clients, you should use generative AI, it's funny if you don't, for example, right? As a company, you should have embraced it. This is my company that does this very well. Actually, we use generative AI everywhere. And that makes me very comfortable to talk about this, because the smarter clients, they actually do they ask you, so you tell us we should do this internally, but how much do you do it actually? And you should be able to give an answer. So that's lack of skin in the game. But for me, it's interesting the idea if you do consulting and you don't have skin in the game, right? It's kind of the positive thing, because as I said, you can speak the truth very openly, but you're not sticking around when things are bad, right? So I do think we should always keep it in mind when we consult our clients, because they have a very big responsibility for their employees, for their whole organization that we don't have. And because I was on both sides, I did work as a CTO, I did hire external people as well. I do remember exactly this, because I had the whole weight of the financial burden and all of this. Making unpopular decisions as a manager, whether you're in data or in software, most people don't understand what it means, right? In terms of all the layoffs, in terms of hiring and firing people. So I think skin in the game is something that anybody should try to get some and see the weight of responsibility. It's very easy to complain about C-level people. It's very easy to complain about those things, but there's so much weight, so many decisions, and you have to do it once. I think I would really recommend any technical person to try to be a manager at least once, because many people say, yeah, it's not for me, but you should try, so you appreciate your managers more after this, I think.
Oh, 100%. Plus one for everyone struggling with with the weight of doing this. We certainly get what you're saying. It's it brings all the right qualities in you, right? When you actually have been on the responsibility side. And I think the more like it depends on the personality really, but generally the more responsibility and accountability you take, the better you
yeah, so skin in the game is, as I said, I see my identity is very tied to that of a consultant, so I always pay attention to that, because when I give advice to somebody and I complain they don't listen to me, I always think, yeah, but they actually carry the responsibility. My job is to come and advise them, but to be honest, they're the ones who carry the responsibility. So when we consult, we should always think about what, this responsibility that the client has that we don't.
I guess there's the need that comes out is to you basically when you figure out, when you've been on both sides, you really understand that however complex the explanation or the complex the situation is, non-straightforward the answer to a business problem, you're being advised by a consultant, I should go route A or B. There's pros and cons in both ways. Really hard to distill, but the thing that you learn is to try to make this explainable to a 5-year-old, and these are the simple terms in which these people think for a very reason. It's very robust.
Yeah. So
you're more likely to arrive at the good decisions than if you dabble in this complexity and go down a rabbit hole that you really shouldn't be yourself in the first place.
You talk about skin in the game. Now I remember a good example. You should write publicly, right? Because that's skin in the game. You should put your opinions, and the internet will judge you for those opinions, right? And I think I admire people who are very opinionated in our field. I don't agree with them all the time, but always appreciate the skin in the game. being opinionated, saying something which is not very popular,
Here's where
right?
we put a disclaimer: say we like Nassim Taleb, we don't share every one of his opinions. In fact, he's a perfect example of an author that I absolutely admire, despite disagreeing with him, because I like the way he thinks. And even if I don't enjoy or even am completely opposed to his to his conclusion, I absolutely think that the way he arrived to this conclusion is brilliant and original and worth reading. And so. But yeah, this is also the reason we do podcasts and we do things like this, just to be out there to connect with the community. It is the old school way, I think, in consulting to be this kind of, wearing a 3-piece suit and, being this kind of super high nosed. I mean, there's people like this. I mean, most of the law profession is like this. A large part of accounting and finance, although that's changing to be more like normal and, with people with opinions and, just not scared to say what they think on LinkedIn. But I think I fully agree with that. I think it's a super important point. And with this skin in the game comes the authority that you can, that your opinions are worth listening to, right? So
exactly, and there's
been out there,
to be honest,
by the
if you have an idea in our field, for example, that you want to grow, if you have a strong opinion about our topics, data architecture, machine learning systems, all of this, I think if you share them, they will become better. Of course, you'll get different types of feedback on this, especially if the ideas are very bold. But I think our community in general is very accepting. To be honest, I do think people in the data space, science, engineering, and strategy, there's a lot of constructive criticism, but I really admire people in our field who put out like strong opinions about trends. Because it just
thing is, you know what I think that is. I absolutely would agree. This. I think the data community and kind of why I love being part of it is that we all have strong opinions, but they're usually just directed at other things, not at each other, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because we know the complexity around working with this IT versus business versus data. Being on the customer side, being on the industry side, being bombarded by consultants telling you stuff. It's very different. And once you're part of this, you kind of you're kind of in the trenches together, right? So this is why it doesn't feel like unwelcoming and there might be a few pockets of absurd discussions. I think for me, the most absurd one is the data modeling discussion that go very religiously. Which one against which one? But
the data mesh too, right?
Yeah. Huh?
Data mesh as well, right? I remember.
Like we started the data mesh or the Snowflake versus Databricks, or there's a bunch of these, people that feel strongly. But then I would argue that it is important to think about these issues, but the particular implementation will vary. There's not one size fits all. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. And
I learned, to be honest, personally more about data mesh from the criticism of data mesh than from the data mesh idea itself. But the first person to come with the idea, right, from ThoughtWorks, them, right? So it's the idea became much more stronger and established. The more it was criticized.
No, her book is it is one of those critical, books that addressed a lot of what was going wrong when uniting it into a concept, and then people take this concept and absolutely butcher it in every direction, right?
and it became stronger, though, right? Now it became established. Now it became stronger and became established.
100%, and it's in a way I always love to hate agile. With agile, is the same thing. It's a great idea, a great everything. And then the consultants took over, and then the people that listened to the consultants without thinking took over. And then it snowballed into this absolute mess that is behind us, but it's still funny to think about what went wrong there. So, in the data space, it's not done like that. Well, just maybe as a last question, does the future? Let's just going back to the AI. Do you think that the future of open source AI looks better or worse, given the developments and the centralization and the legislation going on?
Mm-hmm. Very, very, very hard question, It took a while, I think, for it to catch up, because I do remember playing with open source models right at the beginning. It took a while. I still think it's very active. And everybody, especially in the German-speaking space, is very paranoid about security. Even with working with the cloud providers, they still don't. The level of trust even there, it's not 100%. So everybody, I think, looks at it as an alternative. And talk about anti-fragility, we should always have the option. I do think. I mean, what happened to the cloud space? Right now, everything is cloud agnostic. Everybody does multi-cloud. So I guess the same will be with generative AI. I think we're going somewhere where always we should have some kind of on-premise open source version, which might be a bit less performant, but it will be safe, stable, perhaps, because you give a lot of power externally when you work with such models. I think the shortcuts are very attractive. You outsource everything. The model training, you don't think at all about those things. But then all of this is somewhere. So OpenAI changes some endpoint on their APIs, right? They put a new model, they don't tell anybody, and then everything breaks, right? Especially more critical applications. And these are risks which can be de-risked with open source. But the gap is very high, I think, right now in performance between open source and GPT-4, for example. I think it's still too big, the gap. But in the future, we do need those variants. But I'm not sure how the field is going to develop, to be honest.
Yeah, we just don't know where we are on the exponential curve, right? Whether it's going to be, whether the development, basically 100% there's going to be development in this on-premise, way more efficient models to run locally on, on your normal hardware. Well, at the same time, the question is, the same exponential development in terms of quality and performance will not be also on the cloud side, being able to do even more. And then you're still going to have to decide which way to go, which pill to take, basically.
And the barrier to entry is very high for a new company, right, to spend so much money on training a model. But it comes to the idea of actually my first book about Python and R. I think in general, you should always opt for diversity and different technologies. It's always a better thing to have more technologies. Because in that case, like to talk a bit about that, like in people who, there was this big fight between Python and R. People said, yeah, R is like ancient language for statistics. Like, why should I know about this? And the other way around, the R people were like very academic, and I was thinking, yeah, we have the fancy statistics.
I've done R in the University of Vienna. I've been one of those that were being raised with R. The University of Economics, Vienna University of Economics, right? Vienna University of Economics.
That we have in common, yeah. And I do think that we have in that community, in the R community, there's some kind of course, like this high-level view. We are like we do Bayesian modeling, fancy statistics. But to be honest, to give an example, like it teaches you a new way to think. It's a completely different language, like the whole language. It's if you write R, it looks in a different way. And there's a few packages in R, like dplyr, for example, ggplot, right, for graphics. This is called the grammar of graphics. That's even a way to code visualization, which doesn't really exist in other languages, right? And they try to copy it. And if you are a Python person and you have a look into this, it will teach you something new. So I think always we should open space for more diverse, different technologies, even if they're super opinionated. The older I became, the more I appreciate people who are opinionated. And even if I don't agree,
likewise, very much so.
In terms of technology, if somebody says something very bravely about technology, I actually like it,
But like this is not the average CTO thought. The CTO thought is like we should have the least amount of new technologies. Just, oh my God, I'm dabbling in this complexity. Just reduce it. Not 10 tools for the same job. So it's always a trade-off, and I guess it really boils down to also personalities and the kind of culture that you have in the organization. For some organizations, this would absolutely bring them down. For others, it'd be like they wouldn't be able to breathe if they have like this rigid structure, limiting everything.
To end on a positive note from my side, I think the future is really bright. And as I told you at the beginning, I met very young people yesterday, and some of them nervous about the economic conditions and being in this field now. I told them, now it is the best time, because I remember when I was starting out, of course, it was easy to get jobs and everything, but the technologies, the tools are very you have the feeling everything was trying to constrain you. I spent more time Googling things and building stuff. And now, with the tools that you have, I'm so jealous, to be honest, of the people who start to do things in data right now. They have all the nice things, and they have the internet, the courses, the documentation, the co-pilots. It's just a beautiful time for anybody to start out. So
great. That's a great way to end this. Boyan, thank you so very much for being a guest. We hope to see you sometimes in Vienna, and we'll catch up soon. Have a great one. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you.